Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction. It's my first time in St. Moritz, and it's fantastic. It's beautiful. It actually reminds me also a lot to Innsbruck, the hometown that I am from. So it's always nice to come from the 30 degrees hot Singapore to St. Moritz and actually eat a coat. That's really wonderful. I do around 50 to 70 talks a year in crypto at meetups, crypto nights. And one thing that I always love to start off with, because it gives me a bit of the feeling for the temperature in the room, is to ask you some questions so that I understand who's actually here and understand the level that we have at the moment. And the reason I do this is, most of the things in any field, explaining them complicated and complex, it's actually the easy part. The difficult part is to make things simply understandable, easy to grab, and if you understand it easily, you can actually share it with other people. And that's what I call this hashtag CryptoFit, because that's what actually this technology of blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies needs. It needs to be simple. It needs to be explainable, because only then actually this fantastic technology can actually spread and take over a lot of these industries. So maybe before we start, could I know, and I'm just going to step a bit forward so I can actually see you, because otherwise the lights are so bright. Who of you actually owns cryptocurrencies at this moment? Could I have show of hands? Who of you is feeling quite good right now with the market crash? Yeah? Okay, great. Who of you joined cryptocurrencies either in 2018 or in the last quarter of 2017? Could I see with a show of hands? Very few of you, wow. Who joined prior to that, prior to Q4 2017? Okay, obviously. Who joined 2016 or earlier? Wow. 2015 or earlier? 14 or earlier? 13 or earlier? Yeah, now the looks wander around. Who are the people with the big bags? 12 or earlier? Still people up? Yeah? 2011 or earlier? Wow. 2010 and earlier? 2009? Anyone Satoshi here? Okay, great, fantastic. If I could have the flip charts up, yeah, that would be very nice. I actually prefer doing a lot more Q&A. I think it's very interactive, and it actually answers questions that you have, which I always think is actually more relevant than me sharing some kind of knowledge out of the blue. I do think, however, having the opening talk and basically kicking off the entire event, there comes a lot of responsibility with that time that you're spending here. And so I do want to be sure that when you leave in the next 45 minutes this room or for the break, that when someone asks you, what is a blockchain? What is a cryptocurrency? What's decentralization? What's an ICO? What's a fork? That you can explain these concepts in super simple terms. Because could I ask, who of you here could explain a blockchain within 30 seconds to someone? Could I see with a show of hands? Okay, very few. That's the problem. If most of you could do it, actually there wouldn't be so much misunderstanding or miscommunication in the press. And so that's what I would love to do. And I'm going to spend around 15, 20 minutes explaining a lot of these very, very simple concepts. And then I would really love to open it up for questions, because I think that's where the main part and actually the real focus lies. Whenever we talk today about blockchain or cryptocurrencies, Ethereum, Bitcoin, or whatever, what we're really talking about is a concept called consensus. Who of you here heard about consensus already? May I know? Okay, fantastic. Consensus basically means what happened and what didn't happen. Who owns how much money? What program got executed? What are the things that actually happened? And in our world, consensus mostly is created in a centralized world, in a centralized manner. Either by a bank, by a centralized server, by a centralized company, by a government, by a state, it doesn't matter. It's always centralized. Now, there have been questions on whether centralization is good or whether it's bad. Now, let's be very honest. Is centralization an efficient method to execute something? It's highly efficient. Centralization is extremely cheap, it's extremely fast, it's extremely efficient. However, there's one big problem. If this centralized party starts misusing everyone's trust that is connected to that centralized party, we have a big problem. And that is the only reason why we as humans actually started to look into solutions that are decentralized. Decentralized basically meaning not having a central party, not having a bank, not needing a government in theory that gives us a passport, but our possibility to identify ourselves without a central party. Us having access to information without this information actually having to be stored somewhere. Us being able to do whatever we want, run a program without needing the actual computer. Not having to rely on Google or Facebook or Amazon Web Service to store our data. Now, in the physical world, decentralization works quite simple. Because in the physical world, things like gold are rare by definition. You can't just copy gold. You can't do that. But in the digital world, it's quite difficult. Because things like double spending happen, where I give a virtual coin to person A, and I can give the same virtual coin to person B. And these people don't appreciate if I just copied my money. That's why we always have a central party in the past. Now, in 2008, obviously no one in this room, but a guy called Satoshi Nakamoto came up with a concept on how consensus could be safely created in a completely decentralized world. And his idea was super simple. It was actually not completely new. It built on a lot of other concepts that have been created prior to that. And this was the concept of a blockchain. Now, what is a blockchain? A blockchain is nothing else than information of what has happened already prior in a community that I am about to join. In Bitcoin, this means the Bitcoin blockchain is a record of all the Bitcoin transactions that have happened since the beginning of 2009, when Bitcoin started. And so whenever you join the Bitcoin community as a full node, now most of you don't join as a full node because you outsource actually the full node to someone else. But let's imagine you joined as a full node. What you would be doing is you downloaded the entire transaction history of this community. If you join the Ethereum network, what you're basically doing is you're downloading the entire execution protocol that this decentralized computer had. Would you be joining a decentralized blockchain on identification? You would be joining the entire information, decentralized, of identity that was happening on this blockchain. Whenever this blockchain is updated with new transactions, this is now not entirely correct, but let's simplify it. More than 51% of the participants of the community have to agree that it got updated. And if it got updated, consensus was created again. If anyone tried to cheat, the majority of the community could always say, no, this is not correct. I know it's not correct because I have the information on my own server. I know it's not correct. So if someone tried to cheat, it doesn't work because the blockchain makes sure this is not happening. The blockchain per se has nothing to do with cryptocurrencies. A cryptocurrency is simply a digital currency that uses blockchain to create consensus so that no one can cheat with the money. And it puts away the need for a centralized party like a bank. It puts away the need for a government. And that is why a lot of banks or a lot of governments are looking at this thing and think, is this actually good or is this bad? What does this mean? There's a big problem with blockchain. Problems that have to be solved, problems that very smart minds all around the world are actually solving right now. Since whenever I want to update this decentralized ledger, that's why DLT, decentralized ledger technology, whenever I want to update this ledger, by definition, I have to tell everyone that's part of this community to update their record in order for consensus to be created again. So, the slowest participant in the community limits the entire system. If one node can update 7 times per second, this is the slowest person. It doesn't matter if there are participants in there who can update it 100 times, that's still the limit for the entire community. And that's what we always call in the entire blockchain ecosystem, and you might have heard this, the scalability issues. Bitcoin has a scalability issue because it can only do 6 to 7 transactions per second, or if everyone was updated to SegWit 12 to 14 transactions per second, there's a scalability issue. And there's solutions to that. And we can talk about these solutions in the Q&A if you want. But at the moment, this is this challenge. Now, there's another challenge in blockchain, and it got solved very elegantly. since I need the majority of the participants to agree with what happened, why don't I, Julian, just go and create 1 million fake notes? And I tell these fake notes, hey, listen, can you all please confirm that I just got the $1 million? This would be really awesome, because then I would have $1 million. And since you would be the majority, I just received $1 million. And this is called a cyber attack. In the book you have, I go through all these things in very, very simple terms. And that is why, whenever you want to be someone who has a vote, who can say what's happening, you need to do some kind of effort. You have to do some kind of work. And in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and in actually most blockchains around the world, this is what we call the proof of work, also called mining. This is important. The biggest confusion out there is that people believe mining creates Bitcoins. Mining doesn't create Bitcoins. Mining creates consensus. It just happens to be that at this very moment, 12.5 Bitcoins get created or get rewarded to one miner who helped solve the consensus. And this so-called block reward halves over time, around approximately every 10 minutes. It keeps going for around 4 years, and then it halves, and then we have 6.25. It started off with 50 in 2009, and probably for the next 100 years, it just keeps going down, and we call this halving. So, in 100 years, when there's no more block reward, what do the miners get? The miners don't get new Bitcoin. They still get the transaction fees that happen during this block. What these miners basically do is they include transactions, updates to the blockchain, and they get paid by the people who want the miners to create consensus for them. And this is the second problem. The more transactions we have, the more pressure there is on all these miners. And since there's a transaction limit, it's whoever pays more gets processed faster. And this is also a really, really, really big debate that's going on at the moment between Bitcoin and forks of Bitcoin. And what a fork is, we're going to discuss in a second. Because some other blockchains say, you know what? We just raise the limit. We allow more transactions per second. Whether this is a good solution or not is up for discussion. But this is where the transaction limit comes in. We also have this question of, is mining actually something that makes sense? Because it's such a waste of energy. There's computers who do nothing else than process transactions and try to back-calculate really, really complicated algorithms. That is why people all around the world, really bright minds, look for new solutions to how to create consensus. For example, there's something called proof of stake. Proof of stake means instead of me having to do some work to create a node, remember, there always has to be an effort, I have to put in some money, stake money, and then I get a vote. Ethereum, for example, is thinking about moving from a proof of work model to a proof of stake model. It's called Casper. It's a Casper update. Now, there's a lot of challenges with this, and I'm just going to point out a few. The first one is, if I get an advantage not to spend my money, it actually becomes not a real good currency, in theory. There's still a lot of counter-arguments to that. Because in a theory, a currency should be spent, a currency should be used. There's something called the velocity of money. The higher the velocity of the money, the more valuable the currency. So if I get paid not to spend my currency, it actually devalues the money. There's another problem, and that is, obviously, the rich have more power because they have more money. This is more of a moral question. But the other question is, in a fork, I own the coins on both chains, so I can just keep staking. I don't have a punishment. What is a fork, actually? We covered this now. Whenever there's a disagreement on the consensus, normally the minority group joins straight away the larger group and says, okay, we had a mishap in our consensus, we're going to join the larger group. But there can be organized efforts to split the consensus on purpose. And that's what happened on the 1st of August, when Bitcoin split into Bitcoin Cash or Bcash, whatever you want to call it, and 2 chains came out. And miners, people who create consensus, had to decide, am I going to mine on the Bitcoin blockchain, or am I going to mine on the Bcash blockchain? What is my choice? And then more and more people started to realize, hey, this might be a very interesting way to kind of create new coins, so why not mine it, fork again? And consensus got split again. And then there's Bitcoin Gold, and we have all these various kinds of Bitcoins, and people ask me, Julian, is this really bad for the ecosystem? It's absolutely not bad. It's actually the necessary evil to undergo all this at this very moment, because Bitcoin needs to become very, very resilient, and many, many other blockchains as well. The ideal solution, and that's just my personal opinion, is a solution that's not really used much for consensus, and that would be something called proof of importance. And that's just a term how I call it. All of you could call it different. What it basically does is, if for me to have a vote to be part of consensus, I have to have some kind of importance. Similar like maybe on social media, or maybe because I do something special, something that anyone can do that doesn't use up a lot of electricity, that doesn't require to stake a lot of money to keep the velocity high in the entire ecosystem. There's no real good solution to this, but what I can tell you is, any argument at the moment that says, my cryptocurrencies don't work because they're so expensive, they waste so much money, that's bullcrap. It's just the first start. It's going to go into the next stage, we have a better solution, and it's going to go to the next stage. It's just going to take some time, and it's a natural evolution in this entire system. This is how a blockchain works. So what's a blockchain? Blockchain is a decentralized ledger, a decentralized storage of information that every participant agrees on. And if it gets updated, all the people have to agree on it. What's a fork? A fork is a split in consensus. Now, so far, the major way to create a decentralized consensus has been a blockchain technology. And some of you might be following other technologies or newer kind of technologies and wonder, what is a tangle? What is the IOTA tangle? What is the hash graph? What are these things? Do they really kill the blockchain? Are these really things that are going to wipe out this technology that all the banks are talking about, that most of you probably hear? Let's look at those technologies. What is a tangle? IOTA said, you know what? We actually don't need to create consensus on an entire community. It's enough if a local group confirms that this is what happened. So instead of everyone having to update everything, it's just a local group. This allows for unlimited scaling, basically, because this slow limit doesn't really apply. There are, I don't want to say a few, I would say there's almost a lot of problems at the moment with IOTA and the Tangle. However, if they work it out, and I think they have a great talented team, it could be a very, very, very interesting option that would compete with the blockchain. I don't think it's going to replace the blockchain, but it would be a very, very, very interesting kind of new thing. Because in a Tangle, the consensus can be more local. There's some problems in IOTA as well where you need so-called coordinators, you need centralized systems, things that the blockchain community doesn't want at all because centralization is not what we want in a decentralized system. And IOTA at the moment needs these things, they need to work out these things. There's newer kind of ideas, and we can talk about a lot others as well, but there's something called a hash graph. These are all buzzwords that you might read on Reddit or in the press or in the news. So the reason I want to explain them to you really simple is that you don't get tricked, that you understand what do these things actually mean. Is it true what the press says, that this is going to kill the blockchain, or is this just some making it really sensational so that people read their stuff? What Hashgraph basically does is, very interesting and new concept, it builds on what's called gossip. It's a gossip on gossip protocol. Now, imagine yourself in a village, and you hear gossip from someone who says, hey, did you hear that this and this and this happened? If you hear it from one person, you're not really sure if this is truly what happened. Well, you talk to another person, you hear gossip from this person, this and this is what happened. And then you hear all these kind of gossip stories. And because you like to gossip yourself a bit, you tell gossip to other people. And what's going to happen is you constantly reflect how valid has the gossip been turning out from all these people. And you start creating notes that you trust a bit more and notes that you don't trust from all this gossip. And the advantage from the hash graph is that, similar like in a Tangle, you don't have to listen to everyone. You don't have to update everything. You can just update a few of the streams. And since everyone is doing this a little bit, everyone has their streams of consensus, meshing it all into a whole group of consensus. Some of you might have heard of, let me leave this, some of you might have heard of something called the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network, the holy grail to Bitcoin, because it's going to solve every problem. The Raiden network on Ethereum. We at Tenx, we also work on something called Comet, where we try to do the same thing cross-chain. What is Lightning Network? Well, if I just keep it very, very basic right now, and this is, let's say this is a blockchain, this is absolutely not correct. I just want to draw something so you kind of get the points. And this is person A, and that person A wants to send person B 5 Bitcoin. Now, in theory, person A would have to tell every person on this blockchain that I just sent person B 5 Bitcoin. And it's this entire question of consensus. Now, what person A and person B could do is, they could open a so-called multi-signature account and create what's called a payment channel between the two of them. They would just have to tell the blockchain one time that they just opened this channel and put 5 Bitcoin in. So the entire network knows, hey, we're missing 5 Bitcoin because they are in this payment channel between 2 people. And these 2 people now can send back and forth as fast as they want, as often as they want, as many Bitcoins as they want, up to 5 Bitcoins, because there's no more Bitcoins in there. This is fantastic, especially for smaller transactions. Because what I can do is, if I open a payment channel, let's say with a coffee shop, I have a payment channel with the coffee shop, and I say, you know what, I'm going to put 0.1 Bitcoin in. And now whenever I pay a coffee, I just pay the coffee shop every single time a very, very, very small fraction of that, with literally no fees, lightning speed. It happens immediately because I don't need to tell the entire rest of the network. And it solves the problem for fees, solves the problem for scaling, solves the problem for a lot. And this is what also a lot of very, very bright minds are working on, not only for Bitcoin, but for many other blockchains as well, to have these peer-to-peer transactions on top of a blockchain. Just think of the implications of this for the industry. It could actually mean that rental cars, insurance, everything could be paid in such small fractions because the fees are 0 and the speed is instant. And one of my big bets for this year, and this is really one of my bets, is that Lightning is going to be implemented. It's implemented in a test version. There are some few nodes already that are using this. But once this starts to really scale and start get bigger, my gosh, this is going to have a really, really, really big impact on the entire ecosystem. I've covered blockchain, cryptocurrencies. I covered a fork. Let me quickly cover ICOs, which is a topic that you're all going to hear or you've heard about. May I know who of you participated in an ICO? Can I know? Okay, some of you. Great. What is an ICO? Well, an ICO stands for an initial coin offering. So it means it's the first time a coin is being offered for purchase. Now, if we look at a coin and we look at Bitcoin, then Bitcoin has an entire blockchain. That means there's servers, nodes all around the world, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, that have to do some kind of effort to stabilize the network, to create consensus. It's a whole lot of effort. Ethereum does the same thing, Dash does the same thing, Litecoin does the same thing. It's a complete independent blockchain. And generally speaking, and these are just terms, right? You call these things coins. Ethereum and many other blockchains don't necessarily have the purpose of storing how much money people have. Bitcoin really is for this purpose, storing how many Bitcoins, this is kind of how much money you have. Ethereum works way more like a decentralized computer. So instead of storing how much money, this computer stores computer programs, stores code, stores the execution of codes. And one of the types of codes you could run on there is something called a token. Many times on the ERC20 standard, which is just a standard on how to program this code. And what this now allows is, it allows any, not really a qualified programmer, but it allows most programmers within an afternoon to create a computer program that resembles a coin, and we call these things tokens. We can define how many of these tokens exist. For example, we at Tenx, we did one of these ICOs in Singapore in June of the last year. We defined we're going to have around 200 million tokens. We can define a purpose for this token. For example, we at Tenx defined the purpose of our token. It's a loyalty program. Whenever people downloaded our app, use our card, they connect Bitcoin, Ether, Dash tokens to it, and spend it, these people get to collect these tokens. The token have a function, they have a utility, they have a purpose. Just like a frequent flyer program would have a purpose. It has extra certain features on top of this. And this is what we do at Tenx. And you have features and tokens by the thousands at this very moment. Since it's so easy to create, and I don't need to sustain a very, very expensive and complicated infrastructure, literally any company with very little budget, very inexperienced maybe, no product, no concept, could, I'm not saying they do, but could offer these tokens for purchase to the public during an ICO. And these ICOs might be called a token sale, might be called a token generating event. It's just a different name for the same thing that's happening. So whenever you buy or participate in an ICO, really do your due diligence. Because the effort to set up an ICO is maybe half an afternoon, and the cost is pretty much zero. It's not exactly zero, but it's really, really low. So the risk for a company to offer tokens, very minimal. The potential reward, really, really, really high. So if you don't do your due diligence and you don't know the team that's behind it, you don't know the trust that's behind it, you don't know what happens to the token, because at the end of the day, price will always go to its value. And it's quite difficult sometimes to judge what's the value of these tokens. And I am one of those proponents that thinks the entire ecosystem of crypto is probably not in a bubble. But the majority of the tokens and coins in this ecosystem are in a huge bubble. And this bubble is going to completely compress, and money will go into those coins and tokens that actually have value. And at the moment, I think it's less than 1% of the 1,500 coins and tokens that are out there that actually have values. So I'm talking about maybe 10 to 15 coins that actually serve a purpose, serve utility, are unique, have a great developer team, are future-oriented. And this is where a lot of problems are going to be coming up, not to the entire ecosystem, but to most of the coins in this ecosystem. If you ask me, where do I see the value at the moment of the entire ecosystem? Well, where's the price at the moment? Today, let's say around 500 billion. Do you know where I see the entire value of blockchain? Difficult. Probably 20 trillion, 30 trillion, 40 trillion. I have not met one person who studied this who doesn't say blockchain is the future. I haven't met one person, because most people agree this is the future. Here's the problem. It doesn't mean that whatever makes up the price today, the coins that make up the price today, are the coins that drive it up to 20 trillion. So I can't just go and invest blindly into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all these tokens, believing that just because the entire ecosystem is gonna, 100-fold over the next years, that my money's gonna 100-fold. Because here's the other question. What's the value of one Bitcoin? We could discuss an entire evening, probably weeks, on what's the value of a Bitcoin. If I ask some bankers, they say zero. And if I ask a Bitcoin evangelist, he's going to say $1 million. So where's the truth? Well, what I know for sure is the price right now is around 10K US. The problem is, I know the entire ecosystem is worth a lot, but I need to pick my winners and losers. And that's where all of you shouldn't follow people blindly. Don't follow any hype. If people are just completely convinced of something and they don't have any proper arguing for it, be really, really, really wary of that. Because that is what creates bubbles. Blind followers, people who follow the blind and they become blind themselves. And this is one of the most dangerous things at the moment. But for those of you that are really smart, and pay a lot of attention, I think there's more money to be made in crypto than in pretty much any of the other financial markets at this very moment. So with this, I want to thank you for this. I want to give you around 15 minutes for Q&A if you have any, and I'm very looking forward to answer some of your questions. Thank you so much.